The quake was detected some 23 kilometers northeast of the Punggye-ri test site, but added that it could not conclusively confirm its nature. But South Korea's Meteorological Administration says the quake was natural. Such detections from North Korea are alarming, especially in recent months, but not all of them indicate a nuclear test has taken place. Late last month, a magnitude 3.4 quake was detected under Mount Mantap, and there have been further small aftershocks since North Korea's sixth nuclear test in early September.
In a statement from the UAE's foreign ministry on Thursday, North Korea's ambassador has been told to leave the country, and Dubai will also recall its own envoy from Pyongyang. It also said the UAE will no longer issue new visas or corporate licenses to North Korean citizens. It's a big blow to the regime, which has thousands of guest workers in the Gulf region, providing an important source of hard currency for the isolated nation. On the same day, Malaysia said it's considering a shutdown of its embassy in Pyongyang, months after recalling its ambassador amid growing tensions. Relations between the two countries have soured following the murder of Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, earlier this year at a Kuala Lumpur airport. Malaysia also imposed a travel ban to North Korea last month, following Pyongyang's repeated ballistic missile tests. These announcements follow similar recent moves by other countries around the world that have either severed or downgraded their relations with North Korea. A total of 5 nations across 4 different continents have expelled their respective ambassadors from Pyongyang in recent months. North Korea's nuclear and missile tests have triggered a wave of global condemnations and several rounds of UN Security Council sanctions.
Signs of nervousness are growing in the White House in Washington as President Trump continues his strong rhetoric on North Korea. At a press briefing on Thursday, Trump's chief of staff, John Kelly, said the American people should be concerned about North Korea's ballistic missile capabilities and that the regime cannot be allowed to have a missile that can reach the US. But he also suggested that there is no need for panic yet, although there was still some anxiety in his words.
Right now, we think the threat is manageable, but over time, if it grows beyond where it is today, well, let's hope diplomacy works.
Later on Thursday, the State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert backed up Kelly's remarks about the importance of diplomacy. She said she was thrilled that the UAE and other countries had decided to cut their ties with North Korea and cited such moves as a key part of the diplomatic campaign to pressure North Korea to denuclearize. Meanwhile, several US senators have expressed their concerns over the president's approach to North Korea. 11 Democrats and independent Bernie Sanders signed a letter to President Trump earlier this week, warning that his inflammatory rhetoric was bringing the US and the world dangerously close to a war that could cost millions of lives, including Americans. The senators urged the president to seek a vigorous and sustained diplomatic campaign backed by sanctions that cut off Pyongyang's resources and influence its decision-making to move diplomacy forward. The letter adds that the diplomatic campaign requires the president's full moral support, as well as steady and responsible leadership.
Said Thursday, North Korea had submitted an application to the International Paralympic Committee expressing its aim of competing in the event. Minister Kang said she hopes North Korea will take part in the Olympics as well to help diffuse cross-border tensions. The IPC and South Korean officials are set to discuss North Korea's participation in the Paralympics next week.
These days, Americans are well aware that North Korea is enemy number 1. The media certainly did a great job there. And now the enemy's image is complete. All you got to do is bring out the hacking card.
Kim Jong-un has targeted the U.S. power grid.
North Korean hackers were behind the cyber attack.
North Korea may have hacked a military network.
North Korean hackers.
North Korean hackers could soon target the U.S.
And guess what? They hacked the power grid, an essential item on the to-do list of any bona fide enemy of America these days. Just take Russia, China, and Iran. If you believe the media hype, they've all been at it at some time or another. In Russia's case, this turned out to be fake news and the story was retracted. Another must-have in any hackers hit the power grid story, the disclaimer. There's no certainty the state actor was behind it. It's based on unnamed sources and there's no evidence the alleged attack actually had any impact.
Attack was allegedly from China.
Alleged Russian hackers.
A group of Chinese, believed to be state-sponsored hackers.
Why can't we see the evidence?
That was by alleged Chinese hackers.
First reported the attack, citing anonymous sources.
The systems were not breached.
Let's look at enemy number 2, Iran. Guess we'll soon be hearing headlines about hackers from Iran gearing up for an attack. Oh, wait a minute. We already did.
There is a template. There's a storyline. And you say either put in North Korea, China, Russia, just put it in. Nobody's going to ask any question. North Korean hackers, Russian hackers did this. No damage. And then at the end, bring in about Kim Jong-un and missiles and that sort of thing. And that will pass. You just say, North Korea, Russia, and we just react. We don't think anymore. And we don't sit there and even suspect that maybe these articles, these stories, aren't necessarily just false, they're just poorly written. This is horrible.
Korean catches, such as crabs, are being sold at markets throughout Hunchun City in China. In August, Beijing agreed to enforce the UN sanctions banning the import of North Korean goods following Pyongyang's continued provocations. But in September, the Associated Press reported that seafood from the north was still ending up at U.S. restaurants via China. CNN claimed that Pyongyang is earning about $300 million a year from seafood exports, mostly to the Chinese market.
You can't hide from Beidou. Almost all Chinese fishing boats have installed China's own satellite navigation system. Beidou, which means the Big Dipper, intends to provide the world's best service. And that means covering the entire planet. Zhou Ruxin is behind the civilian application of this technology. He's the founder of BD Star, a leading private company in navigation and positioning. Real-time observation of over 40,000 boats in the East and South China Seas. Zhou says civilian-military integration is helping drive innovation.
Many of the advanced technologies are coming from civilian enterprises. The main market of private companies is coming from civilian services. In the process of civil product development, they can greatly reduce the cost of technology. The civil-military integration has great significance for improving the quality of weaponry and reducing military expenditure.
Zhou Ruxin says Beidou can provide position accuracy of under 10 meters. The latest product, the world's smallest chip, less than 3 millimeters in length. It meets top world standards. It's just one of various chips they developed for both civilian and military purposes. Liftoff for Beidou was in 2000 with its first satellite. It's an alternative to the US Global Positioning System, GPS. Beidou says it will achieve global coverage by 2020.
China has made civil-military integration a national strategy of reform. This is to give the military better services and technologies, while at the same time helping advance the economy. It is giving the companies just like the BD Star a more competitive edge in the future.
President Xi Jinping wants a smaller, smarter military. The order has gone out to cut costs and integrate existing civilian technologies and services into the People's Liberation Army. Though Beidou is some 20 years younger than GPS, its advances in technology are helping it catch up. BD Star was at the forefront of Xi Jinping's strategy. Its success led the way in penetrating the barriers between military technologies and services formerly off limits to the private sector. Beidou started with the military and went on to develop applications in other areas.
Previously, civilian companies were not taken seriously when entering the monopolized military markets. We survived in the cracks and seized the opportunity to become a world-class company. As civil-military integration gradually advances, this strategy could bring new vitality to the civilian enterprises.
Zhou's company grew from scratch to start to take over the overseas market. The push came from China's military transformation. He's confident about future civilian-military integration because Beidou has shown him the bigger picture.
Produced by Pyongyang's Scientific Encyclopedia Publishing House, it shows the Crimean Peninsula labeled and colored as Russian territory and separate from Ukraine. The Post explains that Pyongyang's foreign ministry had informed them that North Korea respects the referendum held in Crimea to join the Russian Federation, and in the past had voted at the UN saying so. In 2014, North Korea was one of 11 countries out of 169 that voted against a UN resolution rejecting Crimea's annexation. Another map from the atlas shows the Kuril Islands as Russian territory, although some of the islets are disputed by Japan.
Ago, Saturn was a showcase of Soviet pride and technological glory. It fell to its lowest when country collapsed, and along with it, its military equipment producers. And it took almost 15 years for Russia and Saturn as well to wake up from that nightmare.
Until maybe 15 years ago, Saturn was a one-product company. We realized, though, that the product was steadily becoming obsolete and that we needed to engage in all engine fields, not just military ones. So we started developing generators, engines for ships, and the SAM-146 civilian engine.
Together with French aircraft engine producer Safran, Saturn started this joint venture where they produced the SAM-146 engine for the civilian Sukhoi SSJ-100 aircraft. Saturn also participates in production of the latest European LEAP engine for the supermodern Airbus A320neo. Now almost half of Saturn's production is for civilian purposes. It is within the government target set for 2020. All companies from the military-industrial complex must dedicate at least half of their production for civilian uses. The need grew out of the breakup of the Soviet Union and the collapse of its army. People needed refrigerators and washing machines, not tanks and guns. That lesson was also learned by the people running Russia's military-industrial complex.
Until maybe 15 years ago, Saturn was a one-product company. We realized the product was steadily becoming obsolete and that we need to engage in all engine fields, not just military ones. So we started developing generators, engines for ships, the SAM-146 civilian engine.
And in the new environment, the role of privately owned enterprises rises to new levels. The SHERP is one of best examples. The Russian Ministry of Emergencies is among the SHERP buyers. The military is also seriously considering acquiring this amazing vehicle. The government wants to see as many civilian enterprises as possible like SHERP, with dual market products. The concept has been successful in the US for more than 10 years, and Russia is the only other country so advanced in implementing it. The Russians have apparently done their homework, and they're hoping by 2020 their military-related economy will look very different.
This, David, actually interesting what happened in the late 90s with something called Checkpoint software, Firewall One, which was actually purchased by the U.S. Air Force to protect their so-called unclassified systems. It was, look, I'll just be blunt, it was designed by the Israelis, and it had tons of backdoors in it. So I would have thought that we would have learned our lesson very early in the early years of cyber operations, but we clearly haven't.
So is there no way to contain it, Colonel?
Oh, absolutely, but you have to be smarter than the average bear. There's reasons some of the operations I ran, cyber operations, were only run using government personnel. That is to say that you had government employees, either GS or some designation of civilian or military, and you do things to protect what you do. I mean, look, David, the CIA's had the same problem. During the time that the current CIA director's been there, Mike Pompeo, they've had compromises of their technology because they give it to contractors. Right. Contractors seems to be the weak link here, and it clearly what you described regarding the South Korean breach happened because people were relying on people who supposedly had security clearances, probably had some level of clearance, but they were clearly designated or targeted by the North Koreans or other bad guys to essentially be a Trojan horse to get into these larger systems.
I can only imagine that the whole situation has gotten a lot worse because of what we went through with the Obama administration, where we had all kinds of security secrets handled much too flippantly by our Secretary of State, among others. And of course, the overall strategy of how to deal with the world epitomized by the Iranian deal.
Yeah. Look, I talked to some of the senior folks involved in the Hillary Clinton investigation, and they told me that the things that they saw that were compromised literally, quote unquote, set their hair on fire. And these are people with high clearances. So clearly that sort of basically beyond malicious incompetence. You're talking about here a planned event that has been very well, very carefully orchestrated. And let me remind you, David, the Iranians do this. The North Koreans have plenty of time, plenty of capability to do this.
And I'm sure they share secrets. I'm sure they share tips about how to do it better. By the way, I got to say, General Kelly, who gave an unbelievably successful, I think, press conference today, in my opinion, he spoke about how they had been, even though he was very kind to the previous administration, he said, look, I'm not blaming anybody, but I got to say, we were left with a hell of a plate to deal with here. And part of it, of course, what he was talking about was security.
Right. And clearly, not only have we seen from the compromises, purposeful compromises to the media by what I believe to be former members of Obama's staff, I believe people in the intelligence community have leaked. They've got real material weaknesses within the system. And they've got to look at everything. Look, David, I once told a senior administration official going into the Trump administration, they should treat the entire Obama administration like a crime scene. And I wasn't joking. I mean, you've got to look everywhere for both malignant, intentional things which have been broken and things which are just not working.
It's not good. You can't imagine.